In the modern world, top management positions in politics are no longer off limits to women. If they so desire, members of the fairer sex can show their iron character and manage corporations and governments. The road to political equality was, however, fraught. In the past, a woman in power aroused reactions ranging from genuine interest to fear or hatred. In this episode of Simple Infographics, we'll tell you about women who, despite the prejudices against them, left their mark on world history. In 624, a girl named Wu Mei was born to a wealthy family in China. She later became known as Wu Zechen. She's the only woman in 4 millennia of Chinese history to have ever held the supreme title of empress. She was given a good education, and at the age of only 13, she became the young concubine of Emperor Gaozong in the Tang dynasty. In the imperial harem, Wu Zechen was recognized for her good education and nicknamed the emperor's educated or talented concubine, as well as entrusted with the position of secretary. The young woman continued her studies, apparently not particularly eager to end up in the emperor's bedroom. She never became one of his favorites. When the ruler died at the age of 50, Wu Zechen was sent to a monastery together with the other concubines who had not borne the emperor children. But her story didn't end here. The emperor may not have taken or developed a particular interest in Wu Zechen, but his son Gaozong did. When in 650 Gaozong took his deceased father's throne, he returned Wu Zechen to the palace and made her his favorite concubine, surpassing even his lawful wife in favor. In 652, Wu Zechen joined the ranks of the emperor's lawful wives, and in 655 she became empress. Over the years of her marriage, she not only bore 6 children, but managed to get a taste of power. Gaozong himself was extremely weak and sickly, while Zechen, on the other hand, was quite a strong and healthy woman. While her husband slowly withered away, she took all political leverage into her own hands. For 23 years, she stood behind her husband and ruled China in his name. Zechen held sole authority over 5.4 square kilometers of territory and over 50 million people. Having taken power into her own hands, Wu Zechen began to engage in under-the-table political games. The empress systematically exterminated her opponents as well as any potential claimants to the throne. She didn't exercise moderation or humaneness in doing away with her political opponents. She had her victims quartered, among other punishments. Today, it's impossible to determine the exact number of those she killed, but historians suggest that it's on the order of thousands. In total, she exterminated 12 of the imperial dynasty's family lines in their entirety. Other than that, over the course of some 20 or so years, Zechen managed to win a number of wars. One of these was the war with the state of Goguryeo on the Korean peninsula, begun by her predecessors in 645. Having achieved victory in this many-year struggle, Wu Zechen made Goguryeo a Chinese province, in so doing adding 176 cities, 375,000 square kilometers, and 5 million inhabitants to her empire. Gaozong's early death at the age of 55 freed Zechen's hands once and for all. After her husband's death in 683, she gained unlimited power. Of course, the sons of the late emperor claimed the throne, and their mother initially allowed them to formally take their rightful place, but she was not prepared to give up real power to anyone. Her eldest was dissatisfied with this situation. Gaozong sat upon the throne for the first time for a little over a month, from January 3rd to February 26th, 684. He came out against his mother's policies, for which he was sent off to far-off provinces alongside his family. He managed to regain the throne only after the death of his mother in 705. The next in the line of succession, Ruizong, had made no quarrels with his mother and simply sat the throne as a formality for 6 years, from 684 to 690. But Wu Zechen grew tired of even this. In 690, she removed her son from the throne and took it herself. After this, Zechen went even further. She was not satisfied with the term widowed empress, the only term used at that time to refer to female rulers in China. Therefore, on October 19th, 690, Zechen declared herself emperor. Never before nor after has a woman in that country taken that title, usually reserved for men. In addition to the rest, the woman emperor declared herself the first in line of a new imperial dynasty, the Zhao dynasty. Having become the sole ruler, Zechen actively involved herself in religious issues. Buddhism enjoyed her special support, but she also gave much attention to Taoism. Grateful for her support, a number of Chinese Buddhists wrote a composition in which they asserted that Zechen was the daughter of the Buddha and that it was proper for her to inherit the empire from the Tang dynasty. In 682, the empress sent her army to Tibet on a military campaign. As a result of this operation, another 4 regions were added to the dominions of the ancient Chinese Empire. These territories were located by the borders of the modern People's Republic of China and Kyrgyzstan, and they had a total land area about 80 to 100,000 square kilometers. Wu Zechen's reign can hardly be called unambiguous. It was a period of economic growth, religious development, and growth of the empire's borders. But at the same time, Wu Zechen was famous for her cruel executions, the atrocities committed by her secret police, and the political intrigues in the imperial palace. Regardless of the kind of reputation the Chinese empress earned, the fact remains unchanged. Over the course of 40 years, Wu Zechen held power in her hands no worse than any of her male predecessors or successors. Another female leader in a far-off land showed similar cruelty and strength of character. Ranavaluna I lived through the turn of the 18th and 19th centuries on the island of Madagascar. In 1798, the birth of a girl by the name of Ramavo to a typical peasant family did not seem to portend anything special. But her fate would turn out much different than could be expected. When Ramava was 9 years old, her father discovered a plot to end the king's life, and he dutifully informed the monarch of the conspiracy. In thanks, the king decided to marry his own son to the man's daughter. In truth, the young woman had the good fortune to become one of the royal heir's 12 wives. So begins the story of the future queen of the island, who was named Ranavaluna after her wedding. The young woman's marriage to her husband, Radama I, was far from joyful. He came to power at the age of 18 following his father's death. Apart from the fact that he was unkind to his wife, the young ruler got rid of all relatives who could threaten his hold on the throne without hesitation, including Ramavo's relatives. Determined to interact with Europe, in 1822, Radama conquered a large portion of the island's territory with the help of English military advisors. In this way, he concentrated power over the Malagay kingdom, which occupied virtually the entire island, in his hands. But on June 27, 1828, the king passed away at the age of 35. According to the official story, the cause of his death was a disease brought about by excessive consumption of alcohol. But there are those who suggest that the king's wife poisoned him. Ranavaluna had no children by her late husband, so she could not officially claim the throne. But that didn't stop her. In the following years, she managed to accrue a group of supporters. After a short battle with her late husband's nephews, Ranavaluna became the sole ruler of the entire kingdom of Madagascar on August 11, 1828. She held power over more than 500,000 square kilometers and about 2 million people. Additionally, she bore a son roughly 9 months after the death of her husband. The child's true father is lost to history, but he was declared the late monarch's heir. The queen's political views were clearly defined. She categorically opposed any interaction with European states and fought against the spread of Christianity and European culture on her island. Her politics were the opposite of those imposed by her predecessors, who favored cooperation with European powers. Ranavaluna I pursued the goal of preserving the culture, traditions, and religion of her native island. However, she chose radical means of achieving these goals. Thousands of Christians were chased off the island. Trade with France and England was cut off entirely, and all those who publicly favored European values were executed. Even those suspected of sympathizing with Christians or Europeans in general fell out of favor. The number of those who fell victim to the Queen's repressions was counted in the thousands. It is worth noting that the suspects had a way of proving their innocence. The accused would be given poison and 3 pieces of chicken to swallow. If the person managed to spit it all out, he would be considered innocent, though for natural reasons this happened rarely. In striving to protect her native lands from the fate of a European colony, the Queen got somewhat carried away. Over the 33 years of her reign, nearly 100,000 people were tortured and killed in the fight against European values. This number is startling enough on its own, but simply disastrous for a small island. The irony of fate was that all of these deaths turned out to be in vain. After Ranavaluna's death, in 1861 her son Radama II came to power. He favored the European path of development and resumed relations with France and the rest of Europe. Sometime later, in 1896, Madagascar became an official colony of France, which it remained for 62 long years. Only in 1958 did France free the island from its direct rule. Regardless, Ranavaluna I will forever be remembered as one of the strongest female rulers in the history of the world. We continue this list of Iron Ladies with the tale of Sirimavo Bandaranaike from Sri Lanka. In the 20th century, she became the first woman in the world to be the Prime Minister of a democratic country. This future head of government was born 80 kilometers from Ratnapura, the capital of Sri Lanka. She was born in 1916 to a well-off family of Sinhalese peasants. At the age of 24, Sirimavo married Solomon Bandaranaike. That's when her political career began. Her young husband instilled an interest in politics in his wife. In 1951, Solomon founded his own movement, the Party for the Freedom of Sri Lanka. For 5 years, the party occupied a powerful position in the country's political system, and it came out victorious in the parliamentary elections of 1956. Solomon led the government and began strongly promoting social democratic ideology. A streak of success and prosperity began for the young family, but it wasn't to last. A part of society took the party's ideology as nationalism. As a result, Solomon was killed by his opposition in 1959. Sirimavo was left alone with her grief and the world of politics that her husband had opened for her. Solomon's numerous supporters called on his widow to lead the party. After some deliberation, Saramavo agreed in 1960, proving herself an adept politician and leader. She won Ceylon's national elections, so in July 1960, she became the first woman in history to occupy the post of Prime Minister as a result of a fair election. Additionally, Saramavo was entrusted with leading the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well as the Ministry of Defense. From that point on, the responsibility for lives and safety of nearly 10 million people lay on her shoulders. Her political beliefs were social democratic in nature, but not all Sri Lankans were happy with this. In 1962, some Catholic officers of the Volunteer Army attempted to organize a coup. This revolt was swiftly quashed and it failed to grow into a larger resistance. In 1963, Saramavo decided to change the official language of the government from English to Sinhalese. This move was also controversial and found many detractors. Another significant turn in Saramavo's political fate came in 1965. The Party of Freedom lost the parliamentary elections to the United National Party, receiving only 30% of the votes. Because of her party's loss, Saramavo was turned from the country's leader into the leader of the opposition for the next 5 years. Bandaranaike took power back into her own hands in 1970. She led a coalition of parties under the name United Front. This period was marked by a turn toward socialism on the part of the female prime minister and her government. Sri Lanka, represented by Saramavo, actively pursued good relations with the Soviet Union and China. In the end, many private companies underwent nationalization, especially those in priority industries, the production of rice, textiles, and oil. Private oil companies controlled roughly 40% of the country's income before their nationalization. Afterwards, this income flowed into government coffers. All foreign trade also fell under a government monopoly. A year after these reforms, in 1971, Sri Lankan opposition forces undertook an attempt to overthrow the government. Troops from India and Pakistan arrived to assist Saramavo, and power returned to her hands. 10 to 20,000 people died in the clashes, and many believe that this blood was on Saramavo's hands. In 1972, the Prime Minister closed the last remaining British base in the country, located in the city of Trincomalee, and she renamed the country the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. The transition to social democracy was completed. In the following years, the Prime Minister's popularity took a nosedive. Her political decisions and their impact were too ambiguous. A portion of her reforms failed, which incurred negative economic consequences. Saramavo lost the trust of the majority and ended up losing the 1977 elections to the United National Party. In 1989, Saramavo once again led the country's opposition. Saramavo's triumph could have been forgotten if it weren't for one fact. In 1994, a woman won the Sri Lankan presidential election. This woman was the daughter of Saramavo Bandaranaike. Under the new president's leadership, Saramavo occupied the post of prime minister for the third time and remained at that post for another 6 years, until 2000. In 2000, her advanced age forced Saramavo to quit politics. At that time, she was 84 years old. 2 months after her retirement, she succumbed to a heart attack. In the following years, she managed to go down in history as the oldest female politician in the world. All these women are remembered for their indomitable wills and their desire to make their countries better. One sought to rid herself of enemies and increase her territorial holdings, another to cut her homeland off from foreign influence, and the third introduced new ideology. Each of them was certain of their righteousness. You may support or criticize their actions, but such criticism is unlikely to refer to their gender. What do you think about women in world politics? If a person has an outstanding character and is predisposed towards leadership, what does it matter whether they're a man or a woman? Let us know what you think in the comments, and click the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications for when our new videos come out.